Hello, it's December 2024, and this video is inspired by a group that I had joined for a short period of time, and their focus was, and I'm word crafting here for obvious reasons, the focus was not complying with certain things that began in 2020. And it was really interesting to observe something that I've stated for many, many, many years. One, how no matter what group or position, social standing, or anything one might be a part of, these groups, as a descriptive, take from the common human gene pool. And one of the things I've highlighted, for example, is the majority in the human gene pool lack critical thinking skills, an extensive knowledge base, and cannot make conclusions separating their emotions. Now, I'm word crafting that to be kind of delicate and be nice, but basically that's it. And the other thing that I really noticed within this group is how many people, even coming into the group to introduce themselves, say how awake, aware they are. You had a lot of truther types and freedom types coming into this group, and they just think that they're the be-all end-all. Well, of course, everyone has a common ground with the theme, not complying with the events that began in 2020, and that's it. They adhere to other, for example, socially engineered things, socially conditioned things, and there is a divide. And it was really interesting because a lot of people who did not comply with the said really felt that this was the pinnacle of being awake, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Yes, depending on how you want to look at it, for example, from their perspective, not complying may be something major, something that the whole world, many people around the world can relate to. But really, it was only a fraction of the big picture. But again, these people felt like, they didn't comply, whatever, and some facts and truths are coming out and all this other stuff, whether it be real or perceived, just trying to maintain a neutral stance here. They felt that this was them on top of everything, and they can't see the reality. It's just one little fraction that they came together on, for example, in this group. And it was really interesting when asking, for example, questions, and people missing the questions that, for example, I had posed in some posts. They would focus on the lead into the question rather than the question itself. And some people completely missed the mark, and other people came in not even remotely close to anything, for example, in a post, but when asked, like, what does this have to do, like, for example, their comment or the reply, they say, oh, nothing, I'm just taking the opportunity to preach to the choir. Because keep in mind, everyone, or at least on its face, we don't know if there are people who did comply but just joined anyway, didn't tell the truth, whatever. Everyone there just already didn't comply. So to reiterate things that were stated, for example, 2020, 2021, 2022, perhaps even 2023 is of what value, but they feel like they're accomplishing something. I'm trying to think of an example here. As I stated, a lot of people who did not comply are truther types and freedom types, and for example, a lot of people felt that the protest of rubber, as I call it, was the thing that ended it all. And I try to highlight, no, it didn't accomplish anything. In fact, it was part of the plan to further agendas and everything else, whatever. That was just one example. And when I stated that in 2020, 2021, and so forth, I was stating how long it would last and when it would end, and it did. And then people realize, oh, and then they start using logical fallacies and everything else, and then when that failed, they just start attacking. But I found that to be a really, really interesting observation. And what's the point of my addressing this part? Perhaps any of these people watching, or anyone just watching in general, can take from this that just because you may be aware of one or two topics in civilization, for example, doesn't mean that you have the pulse on everything. And really the objective, if there is an objective, could be to, and I hate to use a descriptive, I'm going to use it anyway, to awake to as many things as possible and being mindful not to fall asleep in something else. I really hate using the term awake and everything else. It's just, I did some videos discussing woke and awake really being the same thing, different flavors of Kool-Aid, something else that I've really highlighted. And we don't know what more to say about that. It's simply trying to draw some attention. But I've also said for many, many years, long before 2020, that there's no waking up anyone from any position, from any side. People are programmed, whether it be internally or externally, to accept or whatever something, and that's it. There are those who are maybe on the fence. You might be able to sway them, but really, I suppose, preaching to the choir, this helps those who are on one side not switch over to the other side for whatever reason, perhaps an easier route, easier life, less complicated, whatever, to kind of encourage them not to switch sides. But how often, how many people are really at that point? Perhaps more than we all realize, but anyway, I digress. This is the world that we live in. The majority of the human gene pool today, I'm just trying to think of a word, simple word, and to be polite and nice, we'll just say lacking. Majority of the people in today's world are lacking. And every group, any position, political party, profession, anything else, draws from that human gene pool. So as an arbitrary number, say 75% are lacking. That would reflect in groups and professions and everything else. And I remember stating a long time ago, for example, when it comes to being a professional, say in a position of authority, any position of authority, there's multiple versions of that. At what point does the magic happen when that individual becomes more human than human? And it's a rhetorical question. But this is, or I should say, contributes to civilization's demise. And I'm going to reiterate something I've said many times. We are in the late stage of the last stage of civilization, the age of decadence, again. And we repeat history because history is forgotten either by chance or design. And what always follows is our demise. And then there are, for example, the literal 100-year patterns within. And most people, those who call themselves awake, truthers, especially freedom fighters, are afraid of the time before a new equilibrium is established, when everything, as a descriptive, gets reset. People are afraid. And the ones who are most afraid are the ones who say they are not. But when we go back to, for example, professions and positions of authority and everything else, just to segue for a moment, and I'm going to focus on law enforcement, and just bear with me for a moment. This is not a dig at them. There's something deeper that I really want to highlight, and I've highlighted for many, many years again. People will focus on, for example, brutality by law enforcement. They will show videos and how individuals in law enforcement will overreact. And yes, there are lunatics, as in any profession or anything else, who perhaps just get off on it, but I'm generalizing here. Again, just bear with me for a moment. These individuals in law enforcement respond to a call, and that call is based on a busybody, more times than not. Someone calls in and they think, oh, I see something unusual, this person's acting strange, and they may even accuse the individual of, say, having some sort of weapon or something, perhaps out of assumption, or just to be heard, to escalate their voice so there's a reaction to it. And then by the time, for example, law enforcement comes in, they're heightened already because they have misinformation, perhaps even disinformation about the situation that they're going into. So it might appear just on that alone that they're overreacting, but really they're just reacting to the information given to them. And they don't know what the situation is, especially when a busybody, which is the focus here, exaggerates something. Deliberately even. Sometimes I've talked about something that's called, I just forget what it's called, but when people call the police swatting, sorry, I had a moment there, where people call the police, say something, some big threat, a 10-100, for example, for those in the know, and they go and investigate with full force. And it was just an act of revenge or even a prank. So these people come into a situation not knowing what's going on. Then you compound that with, for example, them being, not all, but them being the majority types that I described earlier that are lacking. So there's many different factors here. Now my point highlighting this is the busybody. So can, for example, law enforcement really be in the wrong when they're reacting to information given by the commoner who is lacking, or perhaps deliberate, or as a prank or whatever? Just something to think about. The busybody is a huge problem. And this is why, for example, throughout history, socially, busybodies were frowned upon, shunned even. And we even see this, for example, in religious texts, how busybodies can have devastating impact on other individuals. And at some point, to some degree, most everyone has been a busybody, and on a very small scale may not have done anything in the big picture of their life or anyone else's life, but on the bigger busybody interference or whatever has had even people taken from life. Now this all ties into what I originally talked about in this video with people, for example, thinking that they're awake and aware and everything else. And a lot of these people in their own lives are busybodies and they don't even know it. On the flip side, with this group that I began talking about, you have people who, as a descriptive, followed along with mainstream, and they were busybodies during the events that began in 2020. Do you understand what I'm getting at here? Anyway, just wanted to give you some things to think about. Hopefully, I accomplished that. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
You're not stupid. It's stupid. Okay? It's so stupid. It's so stupid. You know how since 2020, comedy kind of has been writing itself.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.